Hello. I wanted to just go over the basic anatomy of a gene key. Maybe you have discovered the gene keys and started to explore a little bit just to clarify, or if you're coming to one of my workshops, and this will help you kind of prepare to kind of have a basic foothold on some of the terminology and what it's about. And I just want to thank Richard Rudd and the Gene Keys team for putting together the most beautiful body of work, and really the life's work of Richard Rudd, really downloading and bringing this synthesis to earth was no small feat. Okay, so there are 64 gene keys, and basically in its simplest form, it is made up of 3 words. And these 3 words make up what we call the spectrum of consciousness. And so each of these keys, having these 3 words, they have the heavier shadow state or the shadow expression of the flavor of this key. They have the gift, which is a lot more of the kind of human aspect of the key, how we best operate under the influence of this key. And then we have on the other end of the spectrum of consciousness, the divine state, what we call the siddhi, S-I-D-D-H-I. And it's the divine expression of that same spectrum. So the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi, all being the same flavor of this one of these 64 keys, gives us an opportunity to expand our consciousness. We do this by approaching through what we call the art of contemplation. Contemplation is nothing new. This is really the same contemplation that goes back in almost every wisdom tradition that we know of. Sitting and contemplating and allowing this awareness to arrive. And in my mind, this is actually stretching our paradox and making it larger so that we can experience these divine states and have more compassion for our shadow states, and to learn how to approach these not with any kind of shame or blame or goal or agenda, but to just expand our consciousness and watch what happens. Now, let me briefly, I'll share my screen and show you an example of what I'm talking about. The 43rd gene key. This is the divine state of epiphany, which is part of what the contemplating can actually give you. You have that aha moment. You are raised to another level of awareness, the sense of epiphany. So out of the 64 gene keys, this is number 43. And those 3 words, epiphany being the largest and most profound statement beyond duality and beyond humanness. We don't, as humans, create epiphany. We can't make an epiphany happen. We come to the state of epiphany. Now, as we scroll down here into the other 2 words, we look at more the human state of in this spectrum of consciousness. And in the 43rd gene key, the shadow is deafness. I'm not listening. I don't want your epiphany. I refuse to hear. I refuse to hear the truth. So the part of us that closes off, that shadow heaviness, is not necessarily bad. It's a lot of times through our muddy heaviness that we discover these higher states. Sometimes you have to go down to come up, right? So, and learning how to sit in contemplation of all of these 3 words is really, without judgment, without agenda, is really where the magic starts to happen. So the shadow state would be deafness. That middle word, insight, that's the gift of insight. Being willing to look inward. It's a gift to have insight. And through deafness and insight, it can lead to the state of epiphany for us. And how lovely is that? But not necessarily something that I am, or at least the way I look at these, I'm not trying to get those things. It's more just contemplation of these three words in order to expand the paradox, right, between dark and light, making it yes and then it allows for what I would even call kind of a divine embodiment, or what I've heard it be called incarnated spirituality, to really kind of bring heaven to earth and to have more of these expanded states of consciousness in the duality of just being human, right? In our perceiving the world. So let's see if you have downloaded your holographic profile. Let me actually stop sharing this screen and I will show you my holographic profile. And what we're going to look at is how to read each of these spheres that show up in your holographic profile, and what the number and the decimal and the number, and what does that mean? How do I then approach that with contemplation? So let me show you this. You might have already downloaded it. If you haven't yet, you can get this on the Gene Key website. It's free. And this, you just type in your birth data and this is what arises. So as you see here, each of these kind of has a color and a name. So each of these is what we call a sphere, right? And these are based on where the planets are at the time of your birth. So let's say, for example, my top sphere here, we call this the sphere of life's work, right? So this is how I best approach my life's work. Now, does this tell me what my life's work is supposed to be or that sort of thing? No, this is a way for me to just ask good questions. This key allows me to reflect on how I approach my life's work and invites me to ask if that's true. Have I been doing this? And I would say with all the people that I've worked with their profiles, most of the time it's like, oh yes, this is definitely me. And then it refines how you approach things just sort of naturally. Let's just dive in here to your life's work, right? If you have this and you can look at it, mine is Gene Key 7. And this is the city of virtue. And you can see these here. Remember I said the three words, here they are, right? So the city of virtue. And that's a pretty deep word to contemplate. I actually have it twice. It's right here. It's actually, they're connected. So it's been something I've contemplated for a long while now. So the cities themselves, I don't like to analyze too much. They're a divine state. It's nothing really my brain can even, it tries to put words on, but it's more a state of being. So instead, I look at the gift of guidance and the shadow of division. So for me, I know when I feel divided, I feel separated from either my spiritual connection, I feel separated from others, I feel divided from the unity field. It's very uncomfortable and I start comparing, or I start feeling like I'm outside looking in. And so I look to guidance to help me. Now, sometimes I have to look to other keys for tools, and then we do that sort of thing in workshops, so I won't get into that here. But there's a lot of help to be had through these gifts and these shadows for us to really feel that embodiment of these cities, this feeling of sort of heaven on earth, this incarnated spirituality. It's a lovely tool. So now, the decimal point. The number is the key, And then the decimal point after is a matter of degrees. Now in the gene keys, there are 6 because hexagram, hex means 6. And in each of these lines is a reflection of how you would express that particular sphere. So for me, being under the influence of the 7th key when I was born, on the day that it was under the 4th line, that I have a tendency to be a server. Why am I making this video? Like, I just have this urge to serve. So it just feels natural and good. So if it was a line 1, I would have a different way of expressing my life's work, right? I'd be more of a creator, an originator of things. The Gene Keys does a great job if you take the Golden Path workshops to dive very deeply into each of these keys and each of these lines and discover how our holographic profile, how we resonate. It kind of gives us a mental focus for our contemplation to ask questions about, like, for example, I have to ask myself, what does guidance mean in my life's work? Is it about guiding others, or is it about really following my own guidance and allowing my own voice to speak what is true for me, how I have been guided? That's the way I look at it. And when I feel disconnected and I feel that I am not guided and I feel very divided, it gives me an opportunity to steer myself back to that North Star of guidance so that I can serve in a state of virtue, or I use the term virtue as being thisness. Like it's just this, right? It is perfectly this. All right, so I hope that that's been helpful to kind of understand the basics of the spectrum of consciousness, understanding that each of these gene keys is based in these 64 lines of 6, known as hexagrams, and that they are concentrated based on your time and date and place of birth. You have an opportunity to approach with the art of contemplation these different aspects of yourself, and you're invited to walk through the golden path. You can do it on your own, you can do it with others, but also even just in its simplest form. If you just, like, let's say you got, let me stop sharing my screen. If you just got signed up for the Pulse newsletter, and every 6 days or so we change what we call the transit, and you can just contemplate each transit as they come. It can be as simple as that. There's many, many ways to explore the gene keys. I just like to start with the holographic profile because it usually rings very true and personal. And then you can really see, like, oh, there's some meat on these bones to play with, and start to discover how am I reactive in life, or how can I better respond by understanding and releasing the power inside of our shadows and allowing to find the gift within them so that we can hang out in these states of being like unity and virtue and these beautiful divine words that we get to embody. And it's really fun to do in community, or you can do it as a solo venture and just, going in. We are going into a journey of involution so that we can evolve together. I offer hypnotherapy and spiritual healing hypnosis. So when I work with the gene keys and offering these divine words to really get to explore how they influence you and what the meaning means to you, what do they feel like in your body really can create a lot of very profound healing. So I invite you to explore that. You can book a session with me or a discovery call to kind of talk about how I integrate the gene keys into my hypnotherapy, and we can go on the journey together. Thank you so much for listening.